Hello, 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 everyone, and happy Wednesday. Yes, guys, it is rocking and rolling in the summer, or the ending of the summer, as we say. If this is your first time joining us, hello, my name is Sadie Reben. I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicated to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Lori, did you love that? Did you feel the enthusiasm there? Or I was like, we're
Yes,
gonna vibe into learning today.
I sure did. Okay. I have to make a comment about last week's show, too. There was something special about it. I heard from more individuals. Did you notice that, Sadie, after last week's show? Suddenly, the emails, the responses, there was something about last week's show that seemed to really resonate with people.
I think last week's show was awesome, but then again, I think every week's show is awesome, Lori.
I do too. I do too. So we got a long one today too. So let's go ahead and get started on it. So speaking of last week's show, we're near the end of August almost. I can't believe it. So next week we got Kevin Baker, like I said, new to the program. He's got all-in-one solar, a great story to tell. Got a lot of new people. I got more coming up than I've been able to fill in the blanks. I'm just getting some confirmation on some dates. So I just wanted to give you the ones I absolutely had confirmed. September 2nd, Jay's coming on to talk about his travel company, Premier World Discovery. That is going to be an interesting conversation. Plus, it's a fascinating company with all kinds of interesting adventures. Let's just say it that way. Now, you guys heard Ashley Arnold, Lady Cakes. We did a rerun on it because I thought it was such an awesome show. Well, I got with Ashley. She is coming back on and she is going to give an update. So it's going to be kind of fun because what I wanted to do is for those who had never seen the original program to see it and then have Ashley be able to come on and give you an update on what's happening. So I will be filling in the rest of the dates next week, but that's a preview as to what is going on. Now, for today's Lori's Corner or Lori's Rant and Rave, whichever you want to talk about it. So what I did is I started talking about a topic, and then last week I went into the IRS information, and I'm going back to it, but I'm giving kind of a setting of the stage for those of you who didn't hear or don't remember what I had started on. So a few weeks ago, I started talking about something I've been noticing with a lot of newer small companies. Many of them are almost completely outsourced. Like I said, the owner has an idea or a product, but someone else manufactures it, packages it, warehouses it, ships it, and often handles distribution. What's left over for the owner is mainly the sales process, the records, and owning the company. I asked you to sit with a simple question. If almost everything is being done by other companies, what exactly is your company doing and how much of the profit is realistically left for you? That was where I was. Well, today I want to look at something else that I had done some research on, and that is the companies that are actually doing the work. Okay. So I'm looking at the other side of the picture, the contract manufacturers, the packaging companies, the fulfillment centers, and the third-party logistic providers. They're not small or quiet in the financial sense. They are large, growing markets. Because as I'm looking, okay, everybody's outsourcing it and their profits are getting really thin. There's probably a lot of profit over here. And that's what made me start to wonder this. So, what I looked into is the US third-party logistics market is really what they come under the category. It is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. The global 3PL market, what they call it, is well over $1 trillion and still expanding. Recent industry reports show that the majority of these providers are growing both sales and, my word, profits. Many guys double digit rates. Contract manufacturing worldwide is also a huge and growing industry. It's approaching the $700,000 billion range. Meanwhile, many of the small brands, and I'm even talking larger companies here, okay, guys, even larger companies, the small brands that outsource almost everything are left with a much thinner slice. After the manufacturer's paid, the fulfillment company is paid, marketing takes its cut, and returns are handled. What remains for the brand owner is often this very, very small margin. Now, once again, I'm not saying this model is wrong, but what I am saying is we need to see it clearly. Now, I haven't heard anybody else talk about this but me, which, I'm always the outlier on the things I talk about anyway. But when you hand off making, packaging, storing, and shipping, you are also handing off a large share of the potential profit. The issue I see is people are doing this and then saying, but I'm going to make X amount of dollars. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not left over to make. So I'm trying to get you into reality of what I'm seeing profitability wise, so you understand what is potential when this is your model. That's really all I'm saying. So those supporting companies get paid first, and they're more reliable. They're getting constant income. The brand owner is often left with the last and frequently the smallest piece. So when someone says, I don't really have any overhead, pause and look at the real operational picture. What percentage of every dollar that comes in is already committed to the people producing, packaging, and delivering the product? That number is the true cost of a fully outsourced model. So here's the bottom line. The quiet companies supporting small businesses are often the ones with the more stable profitability. If your business depends heavily on them, make sure you understand how much of the pie they are taking and how much is actually left for you. You got this. Look at the whole picture. All right, guys, let's jump into today's show. Today, I have a repeat guest. Very happy to have David Reynaldo, who is the founder of College Zoom. The original plan that owner David Reynaldo wrote for College Zoom over a decade ago predicted that they'd be fully staffed with former admissions officers by now. That was before he understood the traditional measurements of expertise in the industry. Admissions office pedigree doesn't equate to persuasive writing or teaching ability. David, welcome to the show. Okay, first of all, I love when you tell the story because it's so funny about the room, right? So I will just say, David and I have history. I don't even know how long, but long history. So why don't you tell them where our history comes from, David?
Thank you, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me on. I'm a three-peat guest. This is I think my third time back, so it's
Awesome.
um, Lori was my professor at USC, and in the class that Lori taught, I developed the concept for College Zoom. And as she mentioned, my initial thought process was, I got rejected by USC the first time I applied. I came in as a transfer, and so when the challenge came up to start a business, I thought I could help people transfer. Ended up falling in love with the business. My two co-founders dropped out. Way too stressful. Way too much alligator handling. But me, I was ready. Um, and once I got into the actual practice, I was quickly kind of surprised that the people who were in admissions, worked in admissions, got into consulting, they were more just kind of parroting the exact same things that people would, like in the village industry, just repeat without really knowing the depth of what it was about. And so what ended up happening was I ended up soon getting my hands on the actual admissions rubrics that colleges will grade the kids on. So when they apply, colleges will go through, they'll assess applicants on these different rubrics, and they'll have multiple people grade the kids so that they get consensus on the candidate. And I realized, you know what? That's really where the expertise and like what the secret know-how is. And now the magic question is, how do you get a teenager who is a teenager, right? As they say, teenagers are still children, but they want to be treated like adults. And if you treat them like children, they'll fall to pieces. So how do you get these teenagers to be the ones that actually ascend up the ratings, become authentic fits for these top tier universities? And that was a whole separate skill set, one that requires magnetic coaching, life coaching, persuasive writing, communication strategies, and all while doing it with an invisible guiding hand because we're not the ones applying to college, it's a student. So it was a wild
Right.
ride, and Lori was there in the very inception point when the dreams were big and lofty, and I was trying to copy what the other admissions consultancies were doing because I figured, people are successful, I'll see what they're doing. And then in short order, I realized that everyone just is doing what everyone else is doing without really thinking about it. And then quickly became one of the most unique companies in college admissions consulting with one of the top success rates because we've basically built a marketing and life coaching business inside the shell of an admissions consulting company.
How long, first of all, David, how long ago was that? I don't age in my mind, so of course it was 2 years ago, but it wasn't. When was that? What are we looking at?
2007, I think.
Oh, yeah, just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was a very long time ago. Something that we never chatted about, but it just was a thought that came to me. Now, when you created this concept, it was considered like a contest you had to do as part
Mhm.
of USC, and you had to come up with a company, and people came up with all different kinds of companies to pursue to experience entrepreneurship because David was in the entrepreneurship program. When did you, or do you even recall, or was there a moment when you realized this went from an idea from college to something you were going to pursue? I know when we first talked about it, there was kind of an interest in it, but I don't think when we first had our meetings that you really believed at that point that this is going to become your life. Do you have any kind of moment that you remember when you said, "Hey, I'm going to keep doing this"?
I do. So I was nominated for an award that the guy who the school is named after had to interview me for. And I remember being in the lobby, sitting across from the graduate equivalent of the nominee for the award. And we were just explaining like, oh, like what's your business startup? What's your idea? And when I told him that I was doing college admissions, at least for my project, he just freaked out. He was like, I'm an international student. It was so hard for me. And he almost like went into this like hysterical like trance of like just recounting his trauma with just trying to navigate the process. And as he just went on, I was like, oh my God, like this guy's in a lot of pain. And of course, in school, they're telling us where there's pain, there's opportunity and
Yeah,
money.
yeah,
And
pain
so,
was the big word. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. So if there was a cartoon, he would have been talking. I would have been like, ching, ching, ching.
That's hilarious.
And I authentically did like the business. And then just as I started telling more people about college Zoom, they would have a very similar reaction. It was very opaque, it was very confusing. And then what happened was, what really made me excited about it was there were certain people that I met who had very low grade point averages who got into USC's Marshall School of Business, 2.8, 3.2. And I thought, these are not minority applicants who would have benefited from affirmative action. These are like just white kids from like, metropolitan areas. Like it didn't fit the media narrative of like why certain kids would be selected by an admissions committee. And that actually was my biggest intrigue to figure out like why does USC make certain decisions? What's guiding these outcomes? Because if I am going to be an admissions consultant, if I could figure out how someone with a 2.8 or 3.2 gets into the Marshall School of Business, a top 10
Right.
program, then should be able to help anyone else who's higher than that.
Yeah. Well, now that I know how long ago it is, so some of these things I may remember or believe incorrectly. So you just correct me on this, David, if I say anything that is not what actually happened. But one of the things I remember early on is then you, I'm going to say actively, almost aggressively pursued individuals and relationships in these positions of authority and started not only looking for referrals, but looking to find out what is going on. Like you literally, I remember you were out at this college, you were at this high school, you were over here talking to this person who did some kind of admissions. I don't remember enough, but I remember that I would say, if I was to title it, you did some serious in-field study where you, in just your personality, not in any manipulative way, but you befriended these individuals and started really then obtaining more insight to why did somebody get in when it would appear the narrative they would not. Am I correct in my memory of this? Because I think this was a key instrumental part of the success of the company because of the digging up of information you did.
That is true. And what was crazy for me was that the more I talked to people, the more I found contradictory opinions within the exact same admissions office. Like one admissions officer would be like, not no boyfriend essays, worst essay I could ever read is a boyfriend essay. She told a whole room full of high school kids that. And then one of the kids in the class was one of our clients, and then turns out her best story was a boyfriend essay, and she gets into the Marshall School business. Like what? It's like, and she's the one who ended up having to review and approve that application, right? Um, and it's funny because and I think that it's not just college admissions, but people in other industries may relate. One thing that I oftentimes relate college admissions to is my experience in, working with attorneys. Um, when my grandma passed away, we went through a whole probate issue with her estate and inheritance with my aunts. And the lawyer was like, oh, 50-50, this is how judges look at it. And he kept on parroting the common no, nomenclature or common wisdom of the industry. Ironically, he never actually read the trust maybe carefully because that's why there was malpractice ultimately against him and the guy who even wrote the trust because it was like the Bob Barker like Slinko game. I guess that put the thing in it just the property just kind of goes somewhere where it wasn't supposed to go. But I remember thinking like that was so expensive and it was such a cluster F of like a petition to the court to understand what the hell this thing says, and nobody's actually looking at like like look at the damn rubric.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so it's almost like a medieval, like medieval medicine. If anyone has watched The Last Kingdom on Netflix, with Uhtred, and this idea, there's a scene where I think somebody's stricken with like he gets injured in battle or he gets bitten by something, and they're like cures like, so give him some poison. They didn't know it was poison, but that'll cure it, like versus like. And I'm like, you know what? It seems to make sense in that kind of medieval logic. And that's exactly what I found with college admissions. It was, it's a modern day village industry where there's just so much stuff. And I would say for anyone listening, you really have to use your critical thinking because people just do things that feel official, that feel legitimate, but you'll find that there's a lot of opportunity if you can just find a better way to, service and deliver the outcome the customer really wants.
Did I just hear critical thinking? Does that come close to my favorite word that I preach called discernment? I think so. David, in that, I was actually thinking something. Okay, this is one of those weird one off comments that Lori always makes, right? I feel like I finally became an adult when I realized the world did not work as everybody portrayed it to. And that's really what we're talking about because you'll go through and people say, this is how it works, this is how you do it. And then you experience it. And most people don't even come back and think about it later to go, well, that was a friggin' disconnect. And now I understand that what actually people say happens and what happens is two different things, but nobody really comes back to look at it. But when you come back to look at it, you can find the special sauce and the pain and etc. Now, what I remember next is you spent, and like I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember that you were spending time going to high schools because you were getting in front of the whatever school grade they were in, whether they were junior or senior, I can't recall. But I remember you were getting in front of them at that time period and you were being invited in by some of the officials in the high school. And if I recall, that was your early entry into your customer base. You were literally going into the high school, you were exposing to the consumer, but not the payer, which is a whole nother level. The parent was the payer, but that's how your, can I say, humble beginnings began? Is that correct? Can we go back to that time and space?
Yeah, my first four customers were actually Chinese international students at Santa Monica College, and that we got them as part of the class challenge at USC. We just had to figure out how to deliver our service to our first customers. And for them, it was a simple decision of we either hire these three guys from USC who speak the language of the application and seem to know what they're doing because they're there, or we hire Eddie, who was some kind of a shady guy who was known for writing all the international students' essays for them. And even they knew it was bad writing. So, so we were hired. And then past that, when it came time to actually get my first customers in a high school environment, I had gone back to my high school. It was interesting because there was a fortuitous, or maybe not for the school, a good fortune, but the school had messed up its time sheets or something where they reported incorrect work hours or instructional hours to the state. So they basically had to adjust for a year, like basically having a free period in the middle of the day in order to balance the books. And so in that time, my teachers would be like, well, we just had them do study hall. So if you want to come and talk about being a recent USC grad, come on in. and that's
Uh,
where I picked up a couple of my first customers. And then also USC had me back guest lecturing within, I think, like 3 weeks of me graduating. I was guest lecturing for the summer at USC program. And of course, those are full of high school students who are like, oh yeah, this guy does college stuff. Like I got a couple kids from there. And then slowly but surely, the company started to grow through referrals. And then it took a long time for us to actually hit the point where I made more than minimum wage. But I will tell you what year this was in. Company was founded in the year 2009. And in 2012, 3 years later, I was making $30,000 a year, and I was ecstatic. And it grew and grew and grew all the way up to like 1.1 million. Actually, no, I'm sorry, 1.2 million by 2021. But that it was a very slow growing process, but there's lots to unpack there,
Yeah,
about how such a
and it
small
was,
organization.
but what's interesting is every time you went out and you were pursuing it, you were also a learning machine. You were getting feedback and you were learning. And this is what I talk about, how businesses grow incrementally. And so many people start a company and they're like, okay, I'm starting this company. I got this idea. And then in 2 years, I'm going to sell it to somebody. I'm like, no, probably won't happen that way. So I find that today's entrepreneurs are fast tracking through some Hollywood scene that I'm not knowing in existence. That's not the reality. Let's go back to that time period. And this I do not recall. I don't recall when you started hiring. I think you had contract people come in. When was it not just David running the whole scene? I don't remember that. And we don't need an exact date or anything like that. But who did you first hire and when did you start your staffing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I hired my first part-timers in year two. And I
Okay.
believe they were full-on employees. I did withholdings and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then I hired my first full-time employee year six, well, the sixth year of the sixth season of 2014.
Gotcha.
'Cause-
And then I want to go back to something, and I'm jumping ahead and going back at the same time. And once again, correct me if I'm wrong. I think, and I could be taking credit where credit isn't due, so please correct me. But I know today, whenever, and it's been this way the entire time period I've checked in with you or you've checked in with me, I can look at your documents immediately and you're using the same financial documents, the models that I understand and create. And I think we created some of these together. I think I must have guided you in the early financial models. It's been so friggin' long ago, David, I don't remember. But I know that you can literally show me your screen and within seconds I can read everything because it lays out the way that I would think it to be laid out. And I also know that just from our last conversation, you have your finger on the pulse with your little spreadsheet. You can tell me everything, you update them. I think this warrants a little discussion for our audience because you are not a finance background. You did not come from a finance background, but one would never know it to talk with you. And you have been kind of pretty close to
Yeah.
that from the beginning. Can you just talk about that for our audience's benefit?
Yes, there's something called from the IRS estimated tax penalties.
Oh, yes, there are. I do recall that conversation,
Yep, yep.
David. I
And
do recall that one. Yes, I do
yeah.
recall
And
it.
apparently, once you make a certain amount of money, you can't just pay at the end of the year. They expect you to estimate how much you owe them every quarter. And then once you have employees and you start paying your employees over a certain amount, you owe them estimated taxes or withholdings on the employees' paychecks within 2 business days of you paying them.
Yep, you do.
Um, so, so I, so College Zoom started off with a very simple spreadsheet. And it was just a simple way for me to track clients, just, understand like money coming in, money coming out, just have the overall income every year. And as I started hiring my first employees, I started off very slow. It was only like one or two employees at the time. I had to learn all the stuff, and I would make these Excel sheets. And then as I went through the years and I got more complex, I would layer on more and more layers. So like they say, like what was it? Like the city of Troy had like 7 layers of cities built on top of each other. My spreadsheets have done that way. There was an early cash flow analysis he gave me, Lori, which at first I didn't understand. And then eventually we came back to it. We made a profit and loss, a balance sheet,
Yeah.
a cash flow projection statement. Um, I have statements about like, estimated taxes, employment withholdings, all these things. But what's really cool about that is being able to know the business inside and out. What blows my mind is that every year has these certain cycles to it. And especially being a seasonal business where it goes from like very slow to super busy. And it's like almost like clockwork, like the same kind of psychology of person comes in at the exact same time of the year, because in a way, like senior year is very cyclical, junior year is very cyclical. And to be able to understand the business from that standpoint, you know, it's interesting because you don't think about on the surface, but like right now, if we're doing marketing, if we needed to, we can get very specific about what kind of parent is actually contacting us in the middle of July versus the early August. You know, generally the marketing can still be vague where it captures all of them, but there generally is a very distinct pattern in that those two different customers have a different impetus for even reaching out to a consultant in the first place, which is nuanced but interesting.
Yeah, and one thing, so this is where I think it's interesting to go next. And once again, I'll get just enough and you'll be able to pick up on it. There was a point in time, and it was a longer point in time, it was just when you communicated with me about it, where the way I see it is you went from a pure consulting company to a recognizing that there could be a process, a mechanism, a format that you could actually become kind of a product company in a way, in addition to the consulting. And you started looking at how you could, my famous word that I make up a long time ago, productize the consulting process. And in that, I feel, correct me if I'm wrong once again, David, that was a game changer for you because it went from we're a little college admissions consulting firm to we have a process. You go through this, then you do this, then you do this, you fill out this, and then this happens. And you literally started going back in, taking all the information you amassed, and you started looking at how to put a computer generated model together that didn't remove the consulting. You didn't become a fill out this form and it spits out something. You improved your internal capability. You efficiently structured things. You became more effective internally, and you started functioning in a different capacity than you had previously. Don't know what happened prior to that for you to notice that. Don't remember all that, but I know it was a turning point that I recognized. Does that make sense in your world?
It does. And the key thing was there were a couple key distinctions I had early on in the first couple of years when I was volunteering at my old high school. I was volunteering for the English language learning department for like, you know, students who don't speak English as their native language. And they were writing personal essays that were very similar to the personal statements of college essays. Um, and it was interesting because the professor, or Dr. Ramsey, she was a PhD teaching high school, which is rare, right?
Yeah.
She told me like, you know, when you take the kid's first paragraph on these family vacation essays, they're going to communicate a certain way because that's just how we naturally think. You know, when we write, we our mind tends to work in one flow. It goes from like, I'm describing what's happening, then I'm going to tell you with the context around it, and lastly, I'll tell you how it made me feel. And she says, but if you're a listener, you're going to be bored by that. You need the exact opposite of that order if you're the listener.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
she says, make them have the emotion first, then tease them with some context, and then lastly, tell them what's happening. And so I would go through in these little group sessions and I would take each kid's essay and I would mentor them. I just simply just flip the order of ideas in their first paragraph, and almost like clockwork, it was like boom, better hook, better first paragraph. It fooled me into reading like into the second paragraph already. And when I realized that, I thought, wow, like writing is not this kind of creative, subjective, you know, subject that people make it out to be. Writing actually has very foundational principles and writing mechanics. And that realization, coupled with the idea that there's a 650 word limit on this essay, means there's only a finite number of combinations of storytelling that you can portray in a one-page essay. And then, of course, if there's a rubric that's trying to figure out, like, hey, you know,
Exactly. Put
what have
you
you
in a
got?
box, right?
Exactly. Then it really starts to funnel down to what the winning possibilities are. And so once I saw that magic with the first paragraph, I realized that any kid, no matter how good or bad of a student they were, could have an enticing first paragraph based on just simply the sequencing of ideas, not necessarily the ideas themselves, right? And I realized there's a word limit that led me down a whole rabbit hole where, you know, what makes a really good essay is self-reflection. The problem is most students don't know how to ask themselves the right kind of questions to access the parts of their intellect or their memory so that it can be used and translated into an essay. But all those different things are actually processes, right? If I ask someone, what's the most embarrassing moment from your high school experience? It's one question, but now everyone's going to have a different answer. And now the question is, can I basically create like a decision model where I can figure out based on all these experiences that you've now, you know, come up with, how do we know which ones will actually rate higher based on what's the value of the reader? And we did that not just for the college essays, which are 40% of the actual application real estate, but we did that for 100% of the college application, which includes the activity summaries being narrativized, the additional information being narrativized. And that's why we've had such a commanding lead in our success rate, because we're really being able to showcase that it's not just one student that's competing. This kid has the brain of two, three, four, five different people. And if you admit them, this kid is way more high power, high octane than simply a kid who's only condensing their whole life to one or two essays.
And you know, it's interesting. So many things in life, we as humans are just putting this input into it, thinking it doesn't matter. We're just kind of doing a brain dump. But at the end, there's some machine grading over here that is determining things for us, and we're not even aware of that connection. And then I remember there was, and this is operationally, we had a lot of conversations about to what degree you mechanized it, to what degree it became just people filled out an app. I'm exaggerating to communicate, but or what degree you used it more internally, to what degree you kept the consulting. So now you had this like process, but figuring out how to implement the process while the customer was still getting the one-on-one and the quality of the service was there, but use it to be more efficient inside. I remember that, trying to go, okay, we got this. We recognize it. We invested time. I remember even looking at a document that you had outlined what it looks like, but then how do we use it effectively in the business? I remember
Yeah.
that. Was that something that you recall as being a question you had to address?
It was. I originally got development funding from USC to develop my curriculum into a program that could be utilized by public high school counselors to give every single kid in their class like privatized consulting help. And we got down to the point where when we were beta testing the technology and the curriculum and tutorials, we would read through a script that would take the kids through all the decision-making processes on a Skype call that was video off. And we would because our mentality was, if we could just have like a tape recorder go play the thing, stop, and then the kid does the thing, then tape recorder again, then we would have a winning product. So we would literally be on video off. We would kind of be talking to each other. The kid would be on call. And the test was, if we could have a conversation and just, okay, read the script, come back to it, read the script, come back to it, then it worked. It worked because, what was amazing was that it's all within the kids' power to do it themselves. They just are like kind of like, they're a little bit blind and they need some guides. Now the problem was, once we got this into actual real life environment of a high school, we had 3 different pilot programs. And the third one was the successful one because all the kids got to a top 3 choice school, even with below average grades, as long as they weren't like the bottom of the 25th percentile. And it was matching exactly what we do in one-on-one consulting. The problem was this. We had to hunt down those kids to come from baseball practice, to come from, wherever, even though they signed contracts, they will be in Miss Lewis's classroom on 2 o'clock on every Monday and Wednesday. And they didn't do it. They didn't do the homework.
It
They
was
didn't
the
do
high
anything.
school students being high school students once again.
Exactly. And that's
Kids
where I
versus
realized
adults. Yeah.
the product was completely like productized. A functioning, fully grown adult with a prefrontal cortex that was mature could sit down and do it and get amazing stuff. But what I realized is that because these kids really don't have prefrontal cortexes that have matured yet, not to say that they're mentally impaired, but I realized for the first time that teenagers, despite how smart they are being valedictorians, they're actually quite mentally impaired. Even the smart kids, they tend to overanalyze. They kind of go in circles on each other. The kids who are not even putting in the effort, they're just kind of like looking at face value. And I realized that, maybe like if 60% of the process is the actual like, do this in this order, but the 40% distributed across the whole process at important touch points to keep the kid feeling accountable and be able to make sure that if they have like a circuit break, we just reconnect the circuit
Yeah. Yeah.
and keep
Yeah.
them going. Like that's what made it all happen. So we ended up not pursuing the institutional business to business model because it was supposed to be a force multiplier for school counselors. It turned into more work for school counselors to make phone calls to coaches and teachers and figure out where the hell are these kids and where are they not,
Get them
they're not
corralled in.
here.
Yeah.
And we just basically put into a private one-on-one counseling package where we just sold the one-on-one counseling, but we would put those tutorials in as homework in between every meeting. And what was really cool was that now, instead of the kids having to pay for one-on-one counseling, that really starts at the rudimentary level of asking questions and brainstorming things that we're kind of having to ask every single kid. The kid can now have an interactive way of getting all that stuff done before the meeting. And now they're showing up with this like math problem, with the scratch work, and we can just, you know, take this kid apart and put them together again as if we're their best friend or most intimate confidant within like 15 minutes. And then bam, we're on to the more advanced levels of writing for that essay.
You know what's interesting to me? Now let's go into David the entrepreneur, because I think
Mhm.
this is where a nugget is. You had this realization, you created a product which in its own right made perfect sense. It seemed like it was the ideal situation. But going back to even the grandmother situation, there's the narrative and there's what
Mhm.
actually happens. Entrepreneurs have a hard time with discernment, with critical thinking. They jump on it and they get blindsided to what is actually happening. One thing I've noticed, David, is you're always aware of what's happening. Maybe not liking it, maybe not wanting to realize it, but you're got your pulse on it and you're seeing when things work and don't work. Do you have any insight at all to what is it within your character, your behaviors, your being that has allowed you to always stop and look at it again and again? Because as we go on with the story, we're going to find more things you had to stop and look at. There's something within you. I think it's a little bit of nervousness and fear of
Oh,
what's going to happen
maybe,
if it
yeah.
crashes, but there's more to it than just that. Any insight?
Well, I would say this. I learned from an early age that people are somewhat predictable because there's certain things that, like when I took a college class on free will and determinism, I was camp free will, but then the determinism stuff made a lot of sense, and I was like, not sure I like it, but I see it.
I agree. I think that too. I think
Right?
that too. We're more robotic and controlled than we believe or want to believe. It's so true.
Exactly. And I remember being like 4 or 5 years old. My dad was trying to teach me how to defend myself with some like rudimentary fighting skills. And he explained like, one thing was like if you throw a punch like this, people's natural reaction is to move away from the punch. And that's why boxers will do the quick 1-2 because they'll get the initial knee-jerk reaction of moving away and they'll fool someone who's not trained to lean right into the punch that's coming that they're not anticipating.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember it was such a interesting thing where I was like, at 5 years old, I could be like, okay, I could see how that works. But the idea that there's an unconscious, uncontrolled initial reaction that people are going to have that sends them in one direction. And now if you anticipate that direction, you can kind of like intercept them. I kind of had this idea of like where else are these little like if then
Wow.
or like hammer and anvil type ambushes happening in life.
That's fascinating.
Right?
You're so right. I'm totally following you, but I have to just sit with that for a second. What a fascination. What a fascinating realization at such a young age on such a fundamental point. You fake them, they move this way and they move into the punch. And you're absolutely correct. It
Yeah.
happens so much in life. And if that goes back to the business concept of finding the pain, it's also finding the reaction and figuring out the reaction a business owner can do to heighten the opportunity.
Yeah, and one thing that I've learned is that when you're the entrepreneur, it's hard to see it objectively because you do so much thought about these like if-then statements of what happens that it almost feels like a movie. You need there to be a happy ending that makes the journey worth the payout, right?
Yeah.
And really what I found with entrepreneurship is that you'll go down this rabbit hole of really understanding the whole process, and then you have a customer who's really like there's like that joke of like men are not that simple. They fart, they burp, and they watch TV and then they're happy, right? And then I realized like that's really who your customer is. Like I was on a call with a kid the other day, and this is like a smart kid, top of his class, straight A's, initiative taking, wondering if college counseling is worth it because he's doing his own research and all this stuff and just wants to know. And we had this moment where I said something, and it just completely just blew his mind. And it was not the kind of realization that I would expect. Would normally like what would blow my mind is like much different from what blew this kid, like top of the class kid's mind. And he repeats it to me. He goes, wait, so what you're saying is I have to convince a total stranger to want to admit me into the class. He's thinking about that. And I'm like,
Hmm.
dude, like that's so rudimentary.
Yeah,
Like
that's
like
kind of
that
why we're talking.
exactly. I assume that we all knew that's why we're here. But the idea that like because he's been told by his teachers express who you are, answer the prompt, be authentic, just be, it's all me, as like a Dear
Yeah.
Diary kind of exercise. And then
Right.
he's understanding that there's some total stranger who, when they read my essay, my face will be imagined as someone else's face. My mom and dad will be someone else's parents. My house is someone else's house. Like everything's being kind of like cast on to me by this person's imagination. And I have to convince that person who's going to misunderstand what my story was really like in real life to let me into the class. And he was just like, psh. Like it took
That
like
was like a
30 seconds.
realization of
Exactly.
life. That's where, kids go from it's not fair, things aren't fair and crying to like, whoa, wait, this is how life works. Let me figure out the mechanics of it. Yeah, that's interesting. So, in your trajectory, to me, right about where we're talking about, I would say, da 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 da, college Zoom hits big. You've got results, you're using social media, you're using algorithms, you're number one in ranking, you're known all over. I would say right about that time period, you take off. You're kind of almost to the point where you could just sit back and go, oh, yeah, baby, I got it now. That's really was some years of high success, high ranking. And I may be wrong on this, but a little bit of consistency, David. I feel like year after year, it was just the same year. You had different things, but you got to stay pretty high on the run for quite some time. Am I remembering it more pretty than it was, or what do you
No,
think?
that's true. It was, I think I semi-retired at age 35. I'm 39 now. Yeah, so I semi-retired for maybe a good, maybe almost 2 years, and then
Yeah.
started like washing dishes, look out the window, wondering, is this is it?
I remember that because it was running on its own. You were,
Exactly.
I mean, I would talk, and you, yeah, family, kids, and you. It was just like, okay, I did it. I'm done. I got it. I remember
Yeah.
that. Um,
And if
it
I
was a
may,
great
Lori,
time. It
uh,
was a great time, right?
if I may say one thing, I think for the entrepreneurs who want to get rich quick, I think that people would always ask me like, "Oh, are you going to sell College Zoom? Are you going to sell College Zoom?" But the systems were so locked tight, it was a cash cow. And so I do enjoy the business. Like I don't want to sell this thing because I enjoy it. It doesn't, when it runs well, it doesn't take much effort to run.
Right.
Right now, all my work is on trying to overcome AI, how it screwed up search because all we never had to
Yep,
market
we're going to go there.
ourselves.
That
Okay, cool,
before
yeah.
did last. Yeah, let's go there. So, as you're kind of thinking, oh, he's semi-retired. Oh, I wish I could be him. Um, Life changes, doesn't it, David?
It
And I
does.
would say there was a little bit, not a whole lot, but there was a little bit of lag where you were kind of in the it's still running okay. And then can I just say, oh shit, it's not anymore. The game
Exactly.
change. And that's where I wanted to get to. I wanted to make sure, which we have plenty of time. I wanted to get to the game changes. I go back and I want to see this. And I've mentioned this before. It's been at least 25 years now, if not longer, David. I wrote an article for some publication and I titled it, I'll never forget it. It was Business Models Are Like Sandcastles. Now, this
Hmm.
is a long time ago. My argument was, because I worked with a lot of family owned businesses, that you couldn't guarantee that your grandchildren were going to run the business for you because by the time your grandchildren came around, technology or something had changed. That business may be obsolete. It used to be where you could have pass it on to at least two generations. Then it became, is it even able to be passed on to one generation? Since then, I've argued, can you even have it within your own life for 5 years? That's the way reality is. So I will just state that, and then let's walk through. You were washing dishes. You wondered if this was it. You semi-retired. What happened next?
Yeah, so revenue started going down, and that was kind of the thing to wake up because I'd never paid attention to any of our marketing. I just knew we were page one on Google. People find us organically. It was wonderful organic traffic, and that was around the time that AI started to disrupt search. Now there was an AI summary. People would go to ChatGPT, and because all the big scammy firms that pay for affiliate links and marketing would be the ones with the most, I guess, like connected traffic online, even though it was like a sponsored article or like a pay to play rankings type scam thing, AI would see that volume of reference and then put all those companies up top, and it completely choked out all the smaller boutiques and individual practitioners.
Pretty quickly too.
Oh
We're
yeah,
not talking over
fast.
years. This was like within a short period of time, your tables turned on you.
Exactly, because people who, and I remember watching a video a couple years ago, or maybe it was 3, 4 years ago, and it was like a business case study thing where there was a woman who had like a Etsy type store, and she would make these little like cute like like homemade trinkets, and she was like making a pretty good like living out of it. And then just like that, the algorithm for Google changed. Nobody found her anymore, and she almost went out of business, lost her home. And then that kind of was her call to action to be like, I need to basically cultivate my own like inflow channels of clients. Otherwise, if people don't know I'm existing and Google is my one like kind of like that's my one pipeline, and it changes the algorithm overnight, I'm gone. It was a hugely traumatizing experience for her. At the
Yeah,
time,
I had a couple clients that sold, like one of them, I'll never forget, it was skateboard wheels overnight. And at that time, the Google ranking, when they started changing the algorithms, destroyed a lot of companies. I feel like AI is more profound. I'm not saying anything against AI. I'm just saying reality of life right now. I think it's more profound and can be more swift too.
yeah, it definitely can. And it's crazy because when I started to look for a solution, well, I didn't look for a solution right away because I was semi-retired.
Yeah, you're
I,
semi-retired. It took
I,
a
wa-
little bit to wake David
exactly.
back
I was
up.
I was fat on the vine, and I was
Yeah,
like,
you were
everything's
fat
going
on the
well.
vine.
But then
You were fat
exactly,
on
and I'd
the
be like,
vine.
how come like this Q4 is not happening anymore? Like,
It's only a
what's going
temporary
on?
situation. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go back to, yeah, yeah.
And so
And then
once
it
I
wasn't.
And then
Yeah.
once I realized that this was actually like a new thing, as I started to look at our online presence, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we've really dropped off. I started to look for solutions. It was crazy because the same thing, that village industry, people parroting, a lot of marketing firms were just, trying to use the same techniques that used for like, commodity products as on college counseling services, which really need to build trust before anyone buys anything. They were all chasing the trends of what Google wants and
And
what
you were
really works.
researching different marketing firms. You were paying for different marketing
Yeah,
firms.
and
You were
it was
trying to find
it
a
was
solution.
exactly. It was all just misguided. It was people just trying to chase somebody who seems to be more confident than I, the
Yeah.
customer, was. And I just remember the first principle of what Google I know tries to do is they're trying to make a more perfect search engine that is going to deliver more value to the person who's searching. And so I started to research AI. I understood that, okay, whereas in the past I could use the USC connection that we had, I could use our success rate, I could use, our work with miracle students who have low GPAs, and that was enough for us to be on page one of Google. Now I was like, you know what? No one's telling me to do this. And even the marketing firm is telling me I'm obsessing too much about my language on the website. But I thought, you know what? I need to re-articulate every single page to make our offer and value much more clear to a machine that's going to categorize us and compare us
A
to
machine.
almost every
You know
company.
what? I got to laugh for a second. You know what, David? You
Hmm.
got in the rubrics. You're telling students that all their essays end up in a rubrics. You're in a machine
I know,
rubrics now.
I
You're in your own
am.
machine rubrics. I'm sorry, I made that connection. I had to laugh. Please
But
continue.
the hard part was I don't know what Google's rubric is. It's top secret.
You didn't get the Rubik's. You're in a Rubik's now too, but you don't have the
Exactly.
key of the Rubik's, but you're experiencing the same thing. They're not getting to know, just like your college student had the realization, you had the realization, but you didn't have the Rubik's.
Exactly. But I knew enough from my background. So I knew, like, what I know is that Google's trying to make search more effective to analyze, actual value to customers. So I have to be more forthcoming about what is it we're actually doing that's differentiating us. And number two, I understood that new search, like AI summaries, it's like the supermarket shelf. There's a top level, a at the bottom shelf, and there's shelves in between, and there's different, like, products they try to place there, like big firms, small individuals, and boutiques in the middle. One might be data driven, one might be like, more narrative driven. These are the ways that Google tries to slot us into AI summaries. And so I started to realize like I have to own my little island, even though we do so much more than this little island. I have to figure, like we'll be the California guys. Like we do so much more than California, but I realized that Google has been pushing me into becoming a California admissions expert, and I'm like no, we do everything. But you know what? For the sake of the simplicity of the algorithm and people's impression in a nanosecond, I was like, you know what? Screw it. We'll lean into it. California specialist, right? And so now we own these little islands of like, search where the organic traffic has come back. It's still not what it was when we were like the number one page for the whole world. Now we're being more locally put into smaller markets by AI. But that's led to now doing things like Meta and Instagram ads, where it's crazy. Like I'll talk to someone who's like from the Palisades, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've never heard of you." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're like, I work with like five kids from your high school every year. I'm in the area, know the school counselors at the conferences, but based on the search, you would never even know that we exist, right?
No,
Even though the
yeah,
office location is in Santa Monica, which is like 10 minutes from you. So
right.
it's been really interesting trying to stay relevant because what's crazy about the actual business side of it is that admissions really doesn't change. These
Yeah.
rubrics haven't changed in like 40, 50,
No.
60 years.
Oh,
And when colleges do make moves, it's more like somebody gaining or losing weight. It's the same clothes, you just got to give them a different size. That's literally like all that happens.
literally, the pain hasn't changed. Nothing about the back end changed, but suddenly it changed so much. Your overall potential continuation of the company.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what was also scary was that initially there was a AI scare that AI was going to replace all the need for independent consulting and college
Right.
admissions
Right.
until people realized that AI is very psychopathic and it just kind of validates, whatever the hell the kid says and makes this a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then kids will start going these circles.
And the circle just looks a little prettier. What do they call it? Lipstick on
Exactly.
a pig? I think I heard that
Exactly,
expression.
exactly. And it was like, now these kids come in. Like I remember one kid was trying to write a letter of recommendation for a California state senator who agreed to write him one, but she wanted him to write it for her. And so he was using AI to write this thing, and because it's being prompted by a 17-year-old, it's like it sounded like a North Korean manifesto dictator like propaganda machine. Like this is the most amazing kid ever, and blah blah. And I'm like, there's no way a 55-year-old state senator wrote this. Like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
There's just no way.
Yeah. You absolutely know it. And one thing I want to make sure we touch base while we have time, you going back full circle, managing the finance spreadsheets so closely. One of the things, and I said this to you in the last call or the one before, David, you successfully recognized the financial burden of the change and you made choices immediately. And that is what sets you apart from a small business mentality and a larger company. Because me, as a larger company CFO, we did the cuts, we did the changes that we had to do, whether we wanted to or not, because we knew the numbers don't lie. You were on top of it. You didn't want to do some of the changes. You knew you had to, and you did enough adjustments internally to make sure the overall profitability did not suffer. You made sure the company stayed safe.
Yeah, that was hard because what really happened was we were gearing up to be a much more massive operation. We had three different
Right.
directors plus me, and we were basically ready for an influx of demand that we were on track for. But when AI changed search, it didn't come. And
Right.
I think one advice I would have for my listeners out there would be, I think a lot of times as the owner, you want to seem like you have everything together and not reveal weakness to people who are under you. But because I was on top of the numbers, I would disclose this to my directors. I explained to them, here's where our numbers are, here's where we're going, here's what the possibilities are. And it was never a me fronting that the business is doing better financially than it actually is. It was like, hey guys, like here's what we're doing. Let's put our heads together on this so that this is what it is. And as a result of that, I really built like a family and it's a lot of trust. One of the directors decided to resign voluntarily, seeing, that it is what it is. And I've always told the people that no one really gets into admissions because they want to work in admissions. It's a field that even across the whole industry, people tend to fall into, not realizing it's an actual job. But usually they have dreams to go to med school, to become a professor, just something else. And admissions kind of happens on the way. Um, and being able to cultivate those conversations, one director resigned and decided he's going to, pursue his love of like, teaching, potentially become a professor. Another director decided, you know what, I've always wanted to work in nonprofits, so she became part-time and now is still on with the team on a part-time basis, but not pulling a director's salary. And the business, organically right-sized itself. And we realized if this is the smaller, flow of customers that we're going to have, how do we let the business survive? And in a way that was really, I mean, it made me cry so many times because it was honoring the different life paths of this family that we've built. Where yeah, certain people have dreams, and you know what? This has been a beautiful chapter, and yet it was the amount of care because sometimes I think people in business, like I know this one person who looks at it as like her employees are like leeching off of her for like a venture, right? I'm paying them benefits, I'm paying this, and it's like maybe a bit of a toxic mentality, but really think that we're all on this journey together on this vessel, and we're trying to make sure that the vessel can sustain because we have people that we care about who are trying to journey on, making this vessel their whole life. For some people, they're just like a transitory, passage on path to a larger and horizon for them, and being able to talk with that specificity about the business, about the finances, people knowing what the salaries are across the team and all that. There wasn't any sense of like secrecy about what's going on. It was like, hey, guess what? Like AI changed things. It didn't put us out of business like we thought for college essays. It actually just made it so that people don't even know that we exist anymore. And that's a whole, I mean, much better problem, I would say, than being replaced by a
Right.
machine.
Because you have to be in existence again. Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
But now I'm like backpedaling, wondering like, I haven't never had to do any marketing. I never had to think about how people
Right.
actually find us. So now I have to basically learn a whole new language, build a whole new pipeline from scratch. And I needed this 2 years ago. So, and I'm starting now.
Yeah, I know. And here's the
Right.
nugget for those of you who have stayed with this story. Here's the nugget. David, emotionally, personally, business wise, how do you deal with the fact that you were thinking you were semi-retired, life was good, and suddenly you're pulled back in, almost like you got on the nice island, you were laying in the hammock, you were drinking an umbrella drink, and then pretty much overnight, you're friggin' back in the water looking for a damn lifeboat. How do you deal with that?
I would say this. When I thought of semi-retirement, I remember from Dante's, I think, Inferno, right? It's like the seven layers of hell. There was a place right between the living world and hell, and it was there's a word for it, I forget. It was limbo. It's a limbo, right? Like being in limbo.
Limbo's a hard on a human. Limbo's hard on a
Yeah.
human.
And it was this place of like constant, like nice sunshine and everything's kind of perfect, but just dull and mundane. And I
Oh,
realized by going through that semi-retirement, I was basically in limbo because it made me realize that when I'm happiest, I'm either hunting or gathering. And I think that's kind of like, in our nature, hunting, gathering, or traveling. And if I'm not hunting and I'm not gathering and I'm not traveling anywhere, but even the travels kind of got repetitive after a while. So if I'm really not hunting or gathering, that I'm not really living up to my like my instinctive desire as a human being. And I just felt like I was kind of like wasting away in limbo, right? Like unfulfilled in a way, because the business has been able to run without me, and we were, overbuilt for the demand that we actually had. So there was really almost nothing for me to do. Um, so as I got cast into this new role where there's a crisis like Star Wars and Luke Skywalker is going to save the universe, I'm going to go back to my roots in marketing. It was actually a very my brain just wasn't used to operating in that mentality. So if you can imagine like trying to learn like a foreign language with completely different like characters to understand the language, there was a lot of like mental pain where I had to be like, okay, I have to grind through, I have to understand this thing. I'm overriding my neural pathways. But the survival of the business, if we keep on bleeding out, we're going to bleed out. So it requires it. And maybe it took about 5, 6 months for me to really fully kind of become fluent and then become, directed in what my purpose is now in the business. And it's been fulfilling. It's been a lot because again, if I would have started this 2 years ago and not fell asleep at the wheel of semi-retirement, we could have hopefully avoided all this stuff, or at least lessen the impact. But now that we are where we are, it's like in a weird way, it's like I'm happier actually working on something than I am like just kind of watching it run.
that's fascinating. I always say that when I go into triage, whatever that means, I feel most alive. I do feel most alive. I can understand that. So we've got 2 minutes. I can't 1 minute, but we can go a little bit overboard. Board. What do you see now that you want to take with you the lesson from this or whatever? I don't like lesson because that sounds like such a negative, but what is it that you are now aware of that you weren't, that you learned that you're going to make sure that you consider? I want to be very vague in my language, so I'm trying to be very vague in my language. And something maybe in the audience who haven't got to that point even can hear from you today.
I think the one thing that comes to mind is my friend Eric told me, if you're not growing, you're shrinking. And in my mind, I'm like, look, I've got my needs met. I got my house, I got my kids, I got my family, I got my car. I'm like, I need nothing in life.
Right.
So I don't care if we grow. I don't care if we stay the same. It's whatever. But what I didn't anticipate was it's not if you're growing, you're shrinking. But if you're growing, you might shrink to one day wake up and you realize that, oh, wow, my cheese got moved. And I didn't realize that my cheese got moved. And I think what's really tough is that when AI came up, there was so much hype. Even if I would have started early, I'm not sure I would have been able to anticipate. Of course, hindsight is always 2020. The way that I would really have to work on the website to get it to come back to organic search, like we're now at least fairly present in. Because back then it was like I would have been like, oh, I guess I have to pay for these bullshit, affiliate marketing articles about college Zoom. Well, guess what? Now those are being disempowered and downgraded in AI because it's evolving so fast. And now we're popping up because we have much more strong organic content that stands out from the vast majority of consultants who are parroting the same village industry crap that everyone hears.
You know, it's so funny. I've always believed in some level that attrition was always happening on every single level. I mean, I could use the food in the refrigerator for dinner. There's attrition. I got to go get more food. And I've always been such a survival instinct that's in me naturally. I've always felt like I had to grow to replace the attrition that I may not even be aware of, the
Yeah.
attrition that hasn't hit me yet. So I get what you're saying. Well, David, this has been, like I thought, a fascinating discussion. And I told everybody that you were going to come on as a seasoned entrepreneur and they were going to get insight into the world of entrepreneurship that many haven't gotten there yet. And they're just perceiving when they get there, this then. And this then isn't always this then as we perceive it to be.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying or portraying future for anybody. It's a crystal ball, but it does. You came at it and you shared it with us, which such as I knew you would, David, authenticity and honesty that I knew that the audience could really hear and learn from it. So I thank you. I thank you for coming on and for being with me all this part of my life that I didn't even realize how long it was. And seeing you develop not only as an entrepreneur, but you were a single man and a father and, you know, family and house. I mean, I've been through it all with you, and it's been a complete pleasure and honor to have experienced this journey with you so many years.
Thank you so much, Lori. It means a lot truly from you. You've shaped me in so many ways.
Well, Sadie, wasn't that a fascinating story?
I mean, it was just crazy in the sense of like the algorithm. We are so beholden to the algorithm where I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, entrepreneurs are always innovating. Like it's just what we do.
We're always innovating. Well, with that, as always, Sadie's going to be staying after to make sure you get in touch with David. Please do. And David, you're always open to
Yeah.
questions or any communication from audience. So if you guys want to just talk with David, he has always been that way and always will be. So reach out to David. You have his info. Check out the chat. They loved it. It was great. And Sadie, like I said, will be around to make sure you get information on how to reach David, information how to reach me. David and I are going to go. So it comes to the time when I have to say, thank you so much for the frequent flyers. You're here with me every week. Thank you so much. If you are new to the show, you can see it's amazing. The discussions are intense and rich. So I hope you'll join me next week for Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Bye, everybody. Bye, David.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All righty, guys. So you know the drill. We got our poll going, and we love the poll because it gives a chance for you folks to tell us what kind of webinars, topics you guys would be interested in. So if you don't mind filling that out for a second, I got hyperlinks going in there for you. I know sometimes people want to know where they can see past shows. So let me get that drop down there in there for you in the chat window. Let me see. I know, right? Wasn't that a great interview? It's just always so fascinating because, what did we say? Like you can always count on change. Like what is it? Like I forget what the exact phrase is, but it's like it's one of those things where it's like you can't count on much, but you can always count on change. That's something alluding to the euphemism right there. So thank you one more time. Let me give you the contact info if you are not yet a client of the SBDC. Please reach out, contact us, check out our webinars. These are all your tax dollars at work, no cost services. So we can do a one-on-one business advising session for you. As you can see, Lori is more into like the number crunching financials, but we also do marketing, writing a business plan, and we have many locations in the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. So maybe you want to do a session in person, you want to do it virtually, maybe you just want to do a workshop and just see what we got going on over there. So definitely check us out, see what's going on. Like I said, this is your tax dollars at work. Because sometimes people are like, oh my God, who do we get? And like, no, this being Los Angeles, we definitely get the best of the best as our business advisors. So they're subject matter experts. So have no fear. Being part of the SBDC family is definitely top tier, I would have to say. So on that note, I see that the I would say poll question is so going. So yeah, definitely fill that out. Like I said, what kind of webinars do you want to see in the future? What kind of topics are you guys interested in? Let us know. What did we think about Lori and David over here? Of course, we think that they're awesome, right? So let us know. Like I said, we love information. It's how we are able to plan our future programming. So on that note, I'm going to put myself on mute because you can tell I can talk for days on end. If there's anything that you want for me to drop down in the chat, please let me know so I can put that information in there for you. Otherwise, there will be silence, but don't worry, that chat is still open. Hyperlinks are still working.